Of course, they are an important part of this marketing technology future, this year ahead, and they do hold the budget after all. So exciting to have this first discussion here with Lou Pascalis of Bank of America and Kevin Mannion of Advertiser Perceptions. Please welcome Lou and Kevin.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Mannion, and this is Lou Pascalis, and we're happy to be here today. Let me just introduce Lou for a second, and he is the Senior Vice President of Customer Engagement and Investment at Bank of America. In that role, he's responsible for communication strategy, media investment, measurement, marketing data, and marketing technology. And prior to Bank of America, Lou was VP of Global Media Content Development Mobile Marketing at American Express. He's also the newly elected chairperson of the board of the North American Mobile Marketing Association, a board member of the MRC, and we'll talk a little bit about the MRC and its position in the business later. And he's active on multiple committees of the ANA and IAB. His career in advertising spans 3 decades, and we're happy to have him here.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have today, so thank you for coming.
So Lou's, he works out of the Bank of America Tower on 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, and we're neighbors. I'm in the Hippodrome right across the street, and we met to have a kind of prelim to this conversation just before the holidays, and I could see my office from his perch way down near the ground level. So let's start by talking about the future. I'd like to talk about the future of marketing, the future of MarTech, the future of agencies in this ecosystem, and then Scott's lead up here is kind of interesting because we're going to talk about the future of partnerships, including some of the companies, in fact, all of the companies that were kind of high on his detonation list. And so we'll talk about that. But let's talk about the future of marketing first. And we showed on the screen here the Harvard loyalty loop. And Lou, you said, and what prompted me to bring this up is that you said this was an aha moment for you, and you've talked about that. Could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I just first sort of have to acknowledge that, I'd like to think in the 3 decades that I've been in this business that I've earned a reputation for being somewhat provocative, but following Scott Galloway on stage is incredibly humbling. I'm sitting in the back fist pumping, and when he comes off stage, I'm like fanboying him, like, oh my God, that was great. So I'm going to try to live up to my reputation now, and I think I'm going to fail miserably following Scott, so prepare for letdown. So this is from December of 2010, and that was in an era where attention could still be bought, i.e. we as advertisers could buy space, run ads, and people were forced to view them. And so it was sort of prescient at that time because this is the future model. We are now, as I like to say, at the end of the advertising era. The forced viewing economy, which is a great quote from my friend Rob Norman, has come to an end. And we now must earn attention. And the way that we earn attention is by engineering relevance in every interaction. And the most relevant thing we can do is to activate the advocates. And so what you see in this loyalty loop is an outer ring, which is essentially a notional purchase funnel, and an inner ring, which is actually where the social heat comes from. And again, December 2010, Harvard. What's great about it is that the advocacy, and Amazon, who Scott was just complimenting globally, greatly, 35% of their revenue comes from their recommendation engine. If you like this, you'll like that. Amazon has said publicly the #1 driver within that recommendation engine is individual previous star ratings and comments from other purchasers. So the value of that advocacy is the lion's share of Amazon's revenue. And it's free if you know how to catalyze it and then you know how to weaponize it. And so I think that's the future model. That's what will compete for attention. That's what people are interested in.
Great. So, and then for Bank of America, I know you focus on innovation and using marketing technology to kind of key into this loop. You've have some really good, some specific examples. One is from Davos, was it last year?
So the last 4 or 5 years, so the World Economic Forum, which is next week, is essentially the Super Bowl for the financial services category. About 2,500 global influencers come together. They talk about ideas, they talk about initiatives, they talk about priorities. And we actually have a very big physical presence there, which we created as a social footprint to start to publish from there. And actually, it was our first experiment, and now I think we're in year 4 or 5 of it, where we're actually leveraging context on Twitter and publishing into that context. So an example might be Christine Lagarde, the worldwide head of the International Monetary Fund, says that women are very important to the growth of sub-Saharan African economies in the latter half of the 21st century. Well, it turns out we have a white paper on that. So instead of running an ad and saying, read this, we say, Christine Lagarde, we couldn't agree with you more, here's our thinking on it. So we join the conversation, we add value, we demonstrate that we share the values of people who are interested in that, and you essentially moneyball your way forward, and it's worked incredibly well for us. We have an 80 share of voice among the financial services category, and some of the highest favorability ever recorded for the bank ever, because we partner in that conversation. The challenge is doing it every day and not just for tentpole events, and that's where our thinking is now. But we have a clip.
Yep, we have a brief clip to touch on that one, so we could run the clip, please.
Welcome back to the World Economic Forum 2017.
Addressing income inequality.
Economic response.
Populism trumps Davos.
It's important for brands to be part of conversations today because the consumer is in control. We are competing for attention like never before. This year, Bank of America was really engaged at taking the responsible growth message of the World Economic Forum and really helping people to participate in the conversation, particularly influencers who are vital voices in that conversation.
www.bankofamerica.com.
The theme of the conference is responsive and responsible leadership.
It creates connection. It brings people closer into the company.
We were able to leverage Twitter's new conversational product to really find out which of the 3 pillars of responsible growth were most interesting to them. We surprised people with a customized moment with all the major relevant topics that were talked around those 3 hashtags. No other platform that I'm aware of allows a dialogue between the brand marketer and the consumer around some shared experience. Sent a clip. My team sent a clip. I didn't realize it was a clip of me talking. That seems a little meta for me. But the point is that the audience was in control, and we had to wrap our message around it and demonstrate that we understood it. And I think that's what this cycle is about. It's about understanding where the consumer is in their journey and then taking messaging and adding it in so that it's relevant in that moment.
Great. And as another example, I know that as a bank, you focus on business and focus on millennials, like attracting millennials. You've done some innovative things with content in terms of your, what's it called, Better Money Habits.
Yeah, it's just a simple play that, there's so much stress about money and, particularly young people, and it's just understanding mindset, motivation, and need state, which I think is the new sort of gold that millennials and centennials, they get a paycheck and they don't understand what all those things on the right are that we all know, are all the different, taxes and whatever. And so we did a Better Money Habits segment on, here's what the pay stub means. And you can't believe how much it's shared. It's a mystery that people are afraid to raise their hand and to say, hey, I don't understand this, but they really want the information. And we can be the hero. We are in a trust-based business. We can explain it from our subject matter expertise and do it in a way where there's no commercial value to that. There's no, so get a credit card message on the end of that. It's simply advice, and educated customers are bank's best friends. And so start young, build that loyalty, invest in a lifetime relationship. Don't just look at a momentary transaction and say, gee, centennials don't have a lot of money, I'm not going to go after them. Because 25 years from now, we'll probably be working for them. So, invest in that relationship now.
So you created a programming with Vice, right? Yes. So want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Vice was an interesting, we tried to decide what's the most provocative thing that we could do as Bank of America to challenge that sort of institutional perception that, banks think about things in a sort of monolithic monologue way. And so we partnered with Vice. It was a great experience. We gave them our problem, they called us back 11 days later and had shot and produced a show as a concept to introduce the Better Money Habits content to millennials, because it turns out millennials don't click on ads that say, hey, if you're a millennial, watch this. That doesn't work. And what we ended up with was we came up with a whole new strategy, which we call pre-contexting, setting up the issue in the consumer's mind, in this case the millennial's mind, with the trusted partner of Vice, and at the end of their piece, we introduce, and here's a way to think about the situation you just saw on the Vice program, which is called The Business of Life, with our Better Money Habits content. And lo and behold, I think we had a 22% completion rate of 21-minute online videos that were driving to our Better Money Habits content. So at that point, we had created a need in the mind of the audience, and we were solving the need heroically as Bank of America. And it's a very virtuous cycle for us, no pun intended. And pre-contexting has really become the core of our video engagement strategy now. Who can you partner with to set the issue up so that you can come in and leverage your expertise to pay the issue off and then glean that benefit for your brand? And by the way, I think the one thing Scott might have gotten wrong is this is the era of brands. Brands do matter. They are so much more than advertising. They are the handle with which your consumers sort of understand the entire relationship, whether it's servicing or content or advertising and everything else. And so in this era when everyone is a publisher and the consumer is in control, brands matter more than ever. We just need to cultivate them differently and think about the long-term KPIs of customer lifetime value. And then I think you'll see just how important brands are.
Great. So talking about where marketing technology is going and how you play in there as a bank, and that is one of your core focuses. You had something pretty interesting to say about programmatic that I'm ask you to repeat here.
So I think many of you may have heard me say this before, that programmatic is the single worst thing that has happened in the history of advertising, and it is the only salvation for the future of marketing. And I believe both of those things fervently. In advertising, it created an inexorable race to the bottom dynamic about lowest cost, highest yield stupidity. And for marketing, it is a real-time signal platform that allows us to connect to people in the similar way to I talked about in the Davos example. I need to know context in this moment. I need to know mindset and motivation and need state in this moment. Programmatic rails can be attenuated to deliver all that. Today, they deliver shoe intenders. And we've all had the Zappos ad that's followed us around for 3 months. Typically, we buy the shoes in the first 18 minutes online. And then the other 5 months and whatever, we're reminded that we bought shoes. So it kind of comes down to a sort of an idea that we've had around segmentation. Every one of us is in 15 or 20 or 30 different segments at any given moment. We're a parent, we're in New York, we're in the advertising business, we wish this guy would get off stage. Well, okay. Which one of those is the way in now? Which one is top of mind now? Programmatic can give us that signal if we stop optimizing the transaction and start optimizing the relationship. This is a relationship business in the post-advertising era, and we need to understand that every interaction is accretive, as Scott said, to that relationship and to the brands that matter, particularly in this voice-driven world where Amazon Echo is a down-funnel experience. You're going to have a very hard time switching brands on that platform, because you don't say, Alexa, list soap powder. You say, Alexa, order more Cascade, right? And so we as marketers need to understand the importance of that brand and the importance, the relationship that the consumer has with that brand, and invest in that over time to stay top of mind.
Yep. So you mentioned relationships. I want to talk about two different aspects of relationships that you have. One is with agencies, and then the other types of relationships are media brands and the ad tech marketing brands in particular. So one of the things that we see in our work, our studies, when we look at agencies, is that there is a lot of pressure there. When we look at our ad tech studies, our programmatic studies, there are questions about to what degree marketers are bringing their technology and their expertise in-house, and whether or not they're involving agencies. And it seems that agencies are kind of in an evolution And so you might think about the Mad Men era and Don Draper, and where are we now? How do you see the evolution of...
Kevin's setting me up, so I believe that, you know, the Mad Men model is going to flip, and Don Draper will end up working for Harry Crane in the future. It is a data-intensive future where the side of marketing that is used to working with large sets of numbers, which is used to working with audiences, which is, you know, got strategic communications planning in its roots, the media agency probably will drive thought leadership in which creative, content, social, experiential, digital, whatever the hell that means now, all roll up into a sort of comm strategy, data-intensive universe. And so, you know, there's a couple of key drivers for the collapse of the agency model. The collapse of the agency model. The first one, I think, honestly, happened about 25 years ago at the beginning of my career, which is when the agencies started to separate into specialties. I actually remember a full-service agency that was just that. They had media, they had everything. Then they all split into these specializations. And what's happened now, and I think everyone who's a marketer in here is dealing with this, we're being told to work more agilely. We're being told to work in large groups that look like NASA going to the moon, where legal and compliance and creative and data is all in the same room. It looks a little bit like 5-year-olds playing soccer. It's a scrum. We're all in there, you know, and like I'm getting media advice from a creative person, which I love. And it's nothing better than that, right? Well, here's the problem. Agencies can't do that in the current configuration because, God forbid, the Strategic Communications Planning Agency says something about the digital plan, because that's going to be World War III, and the experiential people think that the comm strategists are out of their freaking minds because they're all from different agencies. Even if they're in the same holding company, it's still territorial. We have to look past that. We need a full-service model. That full-service model needs to be nimble. It needs to tap into various subject matter expertise. Maybe you don't need a 24/7, 365 strategic communications planning function or, you know, particular buying function. And so we need to figure out that model. That's on the agency side. The client side, too, is very culpable in the problem that we have today. I think many marketers have lost the plot. Many marketers have forgotten why we went into marketing and the role of marketing. If Bill Bernbach came back today, the guy who did those amazing Volkswagen ads in the 60s, and looked at what we do, he'd say, you're all out of your freaking minds. We are in the business of inspiring people to think differently about a good or a service or a situation and change their behavior. Low-cost optimization, high-frequency messaging will not do that. And we got caught for the last 15 years in this sort of down-funnel metrics mentality, and I think it took us away from the future. Clients need to be vocal about what we want. We want ideas that break through. We want to inspire, surprise, and delight audiences. We want to invest in relationships. I don't need scale, I need engagement. I need meaningful connection. I need valuable interaction. I need a high-fidelity identity system that allows me to come back to that relationship time and time again. I'm not talking about PII. I just want to know in a privacy policy compliant, anonymized way that I'm talking to the same individual. Every one of us is investing more and more in content. I don't know about you, but all the great books I've ever read are chapterized. I need to know that you saw chapter 2 on ESPN.com so I can serve you chapter 3 on bankofamerica.com. And if I don't know that, I am a terrible, terrible, terrible marketer, because, you know, it's like a cocktail party conversation where you go up to somebody and say, hey, it's nice to meet you, and they say, yeah, we've met 3 times over the last 2 years, and you just kind of, you know, that's what's happening, and that's where the walled gardens are creating a problem. It's not about targeting, it's about data, and it's about data passback so that I can append that to my DMP, so I can know where I've spoken to you before and what we interacted about, and so when I see you again, I'm up to date on the relationship. Because the consumer's still up to date in the relationship. We're just not getting passed back from those 76% of impressions, which happen to be happening behind a walled garden. That's a problem. So don't worry about the targeting. Worry about, am I getting access to high quality data? And the data that is typically balled up behind the walled gardens is the most ephemeral and most valuable. What are you passionate about? What gets your emotions stirring? What are your need states? What are you excited about in your life? What's your next trip? What was your last trip? Learning to understand that, putting a cultural anthropologist on your team and having them help to figure out what those signals are, allow us to engineer relevance in every interaction, allow us to use the heart and the head, not the other parts that Scott was talking about. I don't know where that went. But the heart and the head to make that connection. Rashad Tabakawala is famous for saying, consumers choose with the heart, then rationalize with the head. And so much of what we do in advertising today is head only, and it's because a lot of that emotional signal is locked up in walled gardens and is desperately needed so that we can engineer relevance in every interaction.
Great. So speaking of the walled gardens and talking about the future of your partnerships, you work with 2 or 3 walled gardens at least.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the fact that there is this duopoly? You have Amazon kind of coming down the pike in a big way. Just a little context, a few years ago, if you asked a Google sales exec who their competition was, they would say probably just Facebook. And now it's Facebook and Amazon.
Sure.
How do you see the leaders, and who's getting to your table and who needs to be at your table?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just sort of a level set. Old school media buyer, comm strategist. We were taught 2 things when I started in this business, back in the 1780s. One, go where your audience is. 2, verify everything. That was pretty much the game. I'm like, this is an easy job. I can go home at 3 o'clock. I love it. Here's the problem now. For the first time in my career, those 2 things are not achievable with the vast majority of digital impressions, because you can't verify anything meaningfully, even though steps have been taken, and I applaud George Ivey and the MRC for what they've been able to do with some of the walled gardens. We still are not in a position where we have a high fidelity understanding of what our dollars are doing relative to individual experiences or even aggregate experiences. Just look at some of the news last year around all the missteps that one of the social platform had in adding things up and using long division, right? So we don't have third-party verification that is in a meaningful way available to us. And so it really creates an unbelievable angst for someone who was trained to do these 2 and only these 2 things. So that said, the audience is where the audience is. And we do programs with all the walled gardens, but you have to question why. You have to ask, why can't the data be passed back? Why can't we get the analytics packages that we need to make apples to apples comparison? If the audience is there, don't you want that comparison? Don't you want to demonstrate, yes, we're creating these really immersive experiences which have longer engagement, and put it out in a way that I can make a trade-off analysis meaningfully? Not like, well, there's a set of math over here for when you're on our platform, and then there's a different set of math over here for when you're off the platform. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that said, we have found...
You said that before that you don't necessarily just want scale, you want engagement.
That's correct. That's correct.
So is there a limiting factor in going beyond Facebook and Google?
No, actually, there's we have found, in our journey, we have found great success with platforms like Twitter. Twitter is a platform of influencers who generally set the tone. It is a context super fountain in that when something happens in the culture, people respond on Twitter, and you can actually understand passion points. There are things that you can do from a learning environment where the scale is such that you can experiment and then inform what you do on some of the other platforms. So for us, maybe we're zigging when everybody else is zagging, but we have found tremendous partnership, tremendous insight, tremendous engagement, particularly for, with a bank like Bank of America, we have 8 core lines of business, including wealth management, investment, retirement. So much of that is driven by influencer, and so many of those people are influencers themselves. And so we can engage with them around things like the World Economic Forum, the Aspen Ideas Fest, contexts where we have really meaningful, rich experiences to share, and join them in those experiences. So we do great things with Instagram. We like the fact that Snap is an open platform. It is not exactly a user-friendly platform from an advertising standpoint, but I know they're working diligently on that. And we do tremendous business with Facebook and Google. You can't buy around Google search. It's just the partnership could be more robust if there was true transparency and openness.
We have less than a minute, and I'd love to stay on that topic, but with less than a minute, I just want you to touch on kind of where we started, marketing technology. One of the things that you said that caught my attention was that MarTech and AdTech are like two seismic tectonic plates.
Yeah, so
Correct.
you know, if you ever think about the California earthquakes, it's essentially the Pacific plate pushing this way and the North American plate pushing this way, and they're coming together along something called the San Andreas Fault, and they're sort of mashing together. MarTech and AdTech have to be the same thing. The most important thing I can say to you today is focus on your identity solution. You have to unite your third and first party experiences with a super high fidelity identity solution. Not PII, but making sure that you're talking to the same person in the same way on your platform, off your platform, and everywhere else you might encounter them. And that's why MarTech and AdTech need to come together. I also think that there's tremendous waste in AdTech, there's tremendous waste, there's too much redundancy. You need to work with your agencies and say, why are we using that vendor? Why are we using that vendor? Well, won't those two vendors do the same thing? And with your MarTech internally, you need to partner like never before. My two most important partnerships at Bank of America are the head of technology and the head of analytics. 5 years ago, they were those guys, and I avoided them like the plague. Now, I talk to them all the time because we're building our future together. But you have to understand that there is a bias inside the enterprise toward MarTech because they've been working with Salesforce, they've been working with Epsilon, they've been working with Acxiom, and that's great. But there's a lot of thought leadership that exists in AdTech that we're going to need to bring together. AdTech is much better at the ephemeral stuff. MarTech is much better at the transactional stuff and the existing customer things. And you need to bring that together, take an active hand in that, think intuitively, what are we trying to do here, and really optimize the relationship, not the transaction, to drive your business forward this year.
You know, when I met Lou, I haven't done an interview like this at Industry Preview, and when we first met, people who knew Lou said, all you have to do is ask questions, and it's like winding them up and letting them go. He's certainly done that. Thanks so much, Lou, and appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.